So in this video, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how we can set up value within inside of our image and then also use value as lighting as well. And I've got two different examples here, something that we could start off with a 3D render, and the image off to the left came from a model of mine from ZBrush, and using some of their BPR filters that they have. It's actually a pretty cool system for being able to generate line work and things like that. If we hit the comma key, you can see if we go to their default render sets, there's a lot of different styles that you can choose from. So they call it the non-photo realistic rendering, and there's a lot of different styles, and I've taken some stuff that they have and just tweaked it and built some of my own. And this is what I've come up with this example here, which is rendered out like this. So I want to show you a few tools inside of Photoshop that can help you take maybe a render like this, or if you find an image that's got some different shading and things like that, how can you turn that into line work that maybe you're able to select a little bit easier. So the first thing that I did, if you take this render and if I just duplicate it, I'm going to show you up here there's a filter and there's a stylize, and we can do find edges. And that goes through the image and it does exactly what it says. It tries to find the edges within the image, and this might be a little bit too thick for what you're looking for, so you can adjust that with levels. So if you hit Control L, that'll bring up your levels, and then we can start to play around with the mids, and then maybe we drag this over here, or this is the high end for the whites. If we drag that over, we're going to get rid of a lot of maybe some of the noise in here. If you want the darks to be a little bit darker, you can drag them in this direction. But that's one way that we can get a little bit of separation for line on here. And what I ended up doing was just putting this over the top of it, and then it was set to normal. So this is 100% for what I found before, and I was just dragging it to the left a little bit to let the render expose underneath, and then this new line work that I have on there, and I can find some kind of sweet spot between the two images that I'm happy with on there. So that's something that we can do for this. The other thing that I'm going to show you is if we select all, Control A, and do a copy merge. So Control Shift C will copy merged, and then we can hit Control V, and that'll paste. So that pastes our image right here. And then there's something that we can do with an image. We can go to Image, we can do Adjustment, and we can do Threshold. Now you might want to make a couple different copies of this before you do this, but if we go with Threshold, you can drag from the left to the right, and then you can see how you can, it almost feels like you're slicing through the image to find different ranges and of the values that exist within that image. So I'm trying to find something that would give me the clearest edges that I can get that's maybe closed off, because what I can do with that after that is done is turn this into something that can be used for selections. So maybe I keep that. I'm going to just hit paste again because I've got that thing already there, and I could also go image mode, adjustment, and do threshold again. This is why I was saying you could dupe it a couple times if you're trying to get a different look, and I was trying to slice it right through here where I could actually grab and you can see the shadow information. So with those two set up, then I can take the opacity and I could drag this down, and it's still working with everything that I've got down below. And then maybe I'm just giving a little bit of shadow information like this on here. And then with this one, if I set this to multiply, I could just take that white and black image and then just control the opacity of that a little bit. So there's some different ways to get your image. It's starting to look a little bit more, flat, I guess you could say. And then now with this selected within here, what I could do is I could call this brush, and then shad for shadow, and then this one maybe thresh for threshold, and then line like this, just to keep everything separated at that point. Now if I tap W for the magic wand tool, if I put a really low tolerance, let's say something like 2, and I'm going to be just selecting in this layer unless I tell it to sample all layers, it should be pretty easy to start selecting some of these things as shapes. So this is not going to be perfect in all cases, but I think this should give me a pretty good starting point. So if I wanted to start building something like, let's say, down here in the body, I would probably make a new folder and I could call this value. Okay, and then maybe just separations, and then I'm going to use this selection that I have, and I'm going to go and make a new solid color layer. So I can go solid color, and then I'll make a value that's a little bit darker in through here. The thing I like about the solid color layers is that you can always go back and you can adjust them at any other point. And if we have color, you could be doing this with color as well, but I'm not going to be doing this with color. So let's see if I push this in a value range and then just push this one down. Maybe it's around 70%, somewhere in that vicinity. The other thing that we can do is with these masks that we have, if we hold on Alt, we can click on the mask and you see what this is actually generating for us. If you hit Alt and click on that again, you can go back to the normal mode. And so maybe the magic wand gives me a pretty good amount of what I'm looking for the selection, but if I need to go back through and just do some painting, I'm just going to go to one of my brushes that is a hard edge brush that has some thick to thin to it. And if I draw on here, you can see what's going on with that. If I tap X, I can cycle between foreground and background color. And so this will reveal, and then this will hide what's going on in the mask in there, because you see that I'm actually painting into, should be white within there. So again, if I just need to get in there a little bit, I can do that. Now, one thing I could do is take this value separation. This layer was set to multiply, and if I drag that up above it, that black line work will always sit on top of it. You can see what was happening before. If I draw this out, I'm actually going to go over that line work. And you may want that as a functionality, but you may not. So if you don't want that and you want the line work to always sit on top of it, you can take black and white line work, you can put it above your color or your value, and then you can set that to multiply, and then those lines always sit directly on top of it. So I'm going to tap X, and then now I've got the ability to just draw on here and take away pretty easily. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to do a time lapse and then do the same process in through here. So I'm going to try to make sure I don't use any other tools other than what I've just shown you, and then put this in time lapse and show you how I'm going to get all the different separations laid out for this. So there are a few little things that I'd like to explain from the video. So what I ended up finding out that I should probably do is take everything that I was considering for my line work and I threw it all into a folder group like this, and then instead of having this be passed through, I put this to multiply, so it makes everything within that folder group turn to multiply. So it's going to keep basically with the multiply, anything that's white, it's not going to make anything darker, but anything that's dark within here, it's going to add a darkening effect to anything that's below it. And then this is the different values that were actually set up within here on this. And then whenever you put the line work over the top of it, you get a look like this. Now using the magic wand tool, I might not get perfect selections on here, but I was going to show you something I could do to make these things bleed out a little bit more. So if you hold down Control, you can select the actual shape in here for the mask. So if I hold down Alt and click on there, you can see what the mask looks like. Hold down Alt and click back off of it. But one thing I can do, I've got white within here, and I know that if I want this value to come through a little bit more, what I can do is go up here and say stroke, and then I can stroke in the center, and maybe I'll do like 3 pixels like this and hit OK for that. And what that should do is wherever that selection is, it's going to grow it out a little bit more. So I'm going to do that for each one of these. If I hit Control H, it'll keep the selection, but it'll hide it. So let's see if we can see a little bit better what's going on here. So we'll do Edit and then Stroke, and I'll hit OK for that. And you can see that it grew that out a little bit more. And I could even expand that a bit more. I can go Edit, Stroke, and then maybe I'll push that out 5 pixels. So that looks to be pretty good. And then I'll hold down Control and then click on the tertiary one and select this. If I want to not see these marching ants, I can hit Control H for that. I'm going to go to Edit, and I'll do Stroke, and it should keep the last settings that we had on there, and hit OK for that. And you can see it grew that out a little bit more. So I can go up here to what I consider the dark, right here, this darker value, and then stroke that and hit OK. I'll deselect that, hold down Control, select this one, and do another one, edit stroke, hit OK. Then let's do this for the face, do this, edit, stroke, and again it's taking that shape and the selection, and anywhere around it is basically adding a thickness that we're telling it. Now if we tell it to do it center, it's going to take a look at that marching ants. That's the center of the line, and it's going to push this way however many pixels and this way however many pixels, like that. And I think everything's good on the eyes, so I think we're good there. These spikes, now I just might go through and just check with a brush and make sure I've got all parts pushed out correctly, and I think this looks pretty good. So in the world of comic books, this would be considered the job where you're flatting all your shapes out and getting those all prepped and getting those ready. I'm just gonna go through and try to be a little bit cleaner with some of this stuff. So for demonstration purposes, I'm not being as clean as I probably should be, but I just want to keep this moving forward and then be able to show you some additional techniques on there. So I think everything's looking pretty decent on there. So this is getting value separation by our different parts within here. So we should be able to, with value, to get this shape breakup and getting our parts to separate with just value alone. So the next thing we'll look at is adding shading to this. Okay, now that we've got our value separations, let's take a look at how we can start to build shading within here. So I'm just going to take this value separation and I'm going to close that up. If I need to get back to it, I can always do that. And this actually becomes nice for us because we could use these as selections a little bit later. Now I did have something in here for the background on here, so if I held down Alt and click on here, I was able to use the magic wand tool and select the background on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control and select that, and I'm going to do the inverse of that. So if I do Control Shift I, that'll inverse my selection, and then now I can close this up, and then maybe I'll make a new layer group and call this shading like this, and I should take that group and put it underneath the line, so the line work can always sit on top of that right there like that. What I'm going to do now is make a new solid color layer like this, and I'll make it a darker color like this, and I'll set this to multiply, so it should just take everything and make it really dark at that point. So I'm going to call this gradient, so just grad like that. I'm going to make a new group and throw it in there, and I can call this grad 2 like that, and then I'll make a mask for this group. So this sits inside the folder group, and now it's going to have a mask on here, and what I can do is I can I'm just going to fill this entire thing with black, so I can do Control Backspace, and that will fill with what is considered the background color, and then this is our foreground color. So now I can tap G, and I can go here with the gradient tool, and I'm just using this. If you go to basics and you open that up, this is foreground to background to transparent, foreground to transparent, sorry, and that will allow us to just click and then drag, and I'm filling with white, so I'm revealing what's in this group now. It was completely hidden because it was filled with black before, and so now I'm just filling this and making it a bit darker like this. So once we've got it set up, again, what I think is cool about the solid color usage is that we can always go back, and if this was too dark, then I can lighten up the value on that a bit like this, and I can hit OK, and that'll hold the value. So now I'm building a little bit of a gradient across all the character and the character suit, and maybe make that just a little bit darker. Now if we've got this set up and this works for us, what we could do is grab this whole thing and then drag it down here to the plus, and that will duplicate it. And this time, instead of just limiting it to just the character, if I fill this entire mask with white, I'll hit Alt Backspace. You can see it's now darkening the not only the character, but it's darkening the background too. So maybe I tap X, and I'm going to take some of that away from the background like this, so I can do a gradient the opposite direction. And then you can see this mask, I'm trying to maybe hide some of that so it doesn't come through. Now with these two over the top of each other, maybe I need to back off the gradient that's on the character, so I can lighten that up a little bit like that. And again, why I really like the solid color workflow is it affords me the ability to come through and just work like this, and go back and tune values and things like that. Okay. So the next thing I could do is make another group, and I could call this shadow, and I'll make another solid color layer, and this time I will make it a little bit darker like this, and I'll fill it with black immediately. So the one thing I didn't say on this shading, what I could potentially do is if I build anything darker or anything lighter, if I, instead of doing this pass through, because these colors are solid right now, so they're sitting over the top of the value stuff, if I put this to something like overlay, let's take a look at what goes on with the shading now. So it keeps the value range that's underneath of it, and what happens is with an overlay is this. If I make a new layer, I'm just going to show you what happens with this. If we go and we make 50% gray like this, and we fill it, I'm going to hit Alt Backspace, and I fill everything with that I can turn off my line work so you can see what's going on here. If I set this to overlay, it will act as if there's really nothing going on there. Now I need a solid color under there. This is showing transparency, so that's the only reason why you're seeing this change here, for it to flip-flop on there. And I could actually even go to that and then make a new solid color layer for 50%, and I could just put that at the very bottom, and that should hide all the transparency stuff. So sorry about that. Didn't really think about that until we're trying to demonstrate this now. So again, we can turn this on and off, and you can see it's set to overlay, and you won't see any kind of change. Now if I make a marquee in here and I fill this with something that's going past the 50% gray range and towards white, it will brighten the image. And then if I take another section here, if you see here, if I flip-flop this, I can tap X, and then I can hit Alt backspace, and that will fill with darker. So on that one layer, because it's on overlay, if it's 50% gray, you won't see any difference. If it pushes darker towards black, then you can see darker shading, and if it pushes white, it pushes more towards the lighter spectrum, which, if you know that, that can come in handy. So I can make this whole layer group for shading, because I want to add darkness or lightness to this. I can make that whole folder group called overlay, like that. So I can turn my line work back on, and then now let's take a look at what we have. This might let us go through, and then we might have to readjust our different values that we had. So I might make a distinction that this is grad for the character, and then this is grad all, like this. So we can go back through, and again with that solid color, I can just go through and maybe make that a little bit darker on the bottom of the character, and I'm trying to pull a little bit more light up on top of the character. So if I want that gradient to go even higher up on the character, I can do this. I can just tap X, and I can tap G for the gradient tool, and then we can just drag this up even further like this, and you can see we're trying to push that that gradient up a little bit further like that, so we're getting a nice gradient on there, just like that. And yeah, so now I've got shadow. Sorry, I took a big departure there for getting to the shadow part here. And then now that I've got that, I'm gonna try to use a brush that is an airbrush. So it's just a nice soft brush like this, and I'm going to paint into that mask white, and that's going to reveal this darker color that I don't have it set to multiply on here. So if I set this to multiply, let's start painting into this and see what this looks like. And let me see if I even put this on normal, if that will give us what I'm hoping for on here. If I push this down a little bit darker, like that, and then maybe my brush is a little bit too soft, so I can take down the size. I just hit these bracket keys that are right underneath backspace. You can see it's right next to the P key, and then the backslash right there. You can make your brush sizes a little bit larger or smaller that way. So I can do this and then add a little bit of darkening effect underneath the belt, maybe this in here, and I can get some separation on here. So again, if we want selection wise, if we found the selection that we already had for the background, we inverse that. If we make that as a selection, we can hit Control H, and then now I've got that as a selection, and I don't have to worry about if I paint outside of the character on here. So we could use this shading to give us, again, shadow information, some separation between parts like this, And what I'm going to do is imagine that there is a light source right up in this area, somewhere in here. And that can help inform some of the decisions that I make about how we start to shade this character. Like this. Now I do realize my eyes are pretty dark, and I did make that color at the very bottom, and I do believe, yeah, if I raise that up, it's going to change the background a little bit. So what I should probably do is just leave that alone and leave that at 50% gray, or could make it a little bit lighter, somewhere in here, 70. And okay for that. And then I'll make another one for on this solid color right here, and I'll call this eye white, like this. So I'm just going to control backspace to fill that with dark, and then I can use my brush and then just paint in this area to make sure this is whiter. And if I need that to be a bit brighter, I can push that up and through there, just like that. Okay, so this is just normal part of the process. You might find some things that you missed here and there and have to go back and just kind of hit those areas up a little bit. So I'm going to do this. Like that. Okay, so that could be shadow information. If I wanted to build something that was a lightning effect, so I could do this, lighten. I'll try to make a solid color like this, and I'll make it brighter, just like that. Now I'm going to fill this immediately with black, control backspace. I just got to get this set up first, and then go to my brush. And then now if I make the brush size a little bit larger like this, just painting in. And again, remember, this is all working because we have this whole entire shading group, and we set this to overlay. So if I make things darker, it's going to push darker. If it's mid-gray, you're not going to see any change. And if I make it lighter, you're going to see it do this brightening effect. So we can use the smudge tool on these masks too. So all the tools that you're used to at your disposal are there for you. You can use the eraser tool if you wanted to cut and carve some things out. So if you want it really hard edge, but really the eraser tool is just either going to do something that's lighter or darker on that mask. So you're not really erasing the mask out. It's just you could have something set up on your eraser to do a different thing than your brush. And then so what I'll do here is I'll go in these areas and try to brighten this up. So I'm making my brush just a little bit larger. You can hold down Alt and then right mouse and drag, or right click on your pen, and that can do your brush size as well. So it's going to treat these as cylinder objects like this. So yeah, I'll go back to the shadow and I'll add a little bit more to this. something like that. Get a little shadow behind the ear. Just like this. And then if I wanted a really strong, something like really bright brights, maybe I'm calling this like a rim light. And then I can make a new solid color for that. And then this one I'll just make really close to white. And again, immediately filling that with black to get rid of that whole entire layer. And then I can start painting and then reveal some of that stuff. So if I put on my brush tap B, and I've got this white that I'm painting with. This time, if I made my brush a lot smaller, let's just go through this and say we've got a rim light all along the outer part of this. And again, if we can find a mask that we've already generated for the shape of the character, I can select it, hit Control H, then that way I can paint and I don't have to worry about going outside of the shape of the character. And what we're doing is we're working, this whole workflow is what you can consider non-destructive workflow. So we are painting in here, but we're not, we're making separate layers for just about everything that we're creating. So that gives you the ability to go back through and tweak that stuff. So especially in a setting where if you're working with an art director or you've got a client, somebody that you need to make changes with, this could allow you to work in a way that allows you to easily make some changes to things and not be completely locked in. Again, this works with color information too. We're just using this for value right now, but it is possible that it can do that. So I just laid down, I was using that airbrush, and then with the eraser tool I can erase out what I drew on there, and that will make it really nice and crisp and give it a hard edge. Just like that. And if you want to smooth it out, you can always put it on the smudge tool. The smudge tool does have, I think there's a blur option right here for this, so it's kind of a softer way of blurring some of that out if you want to do that. The smudge is a bit heavier handed. And so it would take obviously a little bit of time to go through the entire character and get this set up. I'm just going to hit a few more areas and then show you one more thing that I like to do. So after everything's set up, you might, if you need pure whites, if you need things to sit over the top of your line work, I'm going to make another folder group and just call this, let's just do whites like this, and I can make another solid color for that. Just make this white. Let's just fill it with black real quick. Alt backspace, and then now again, because that sits over the line work, if I need to do anything that just overrides that line work, like let's say I'm putting these two highlights in the eyes just like that, I'm able to do that. And then if let's say I'm going to do another highlight here and here, but if I want this to feel, if it's maybe got a little bit of glow to it or light, then I'm able to put those effects on there. So that's how we can get pure whites on here. And again, maybe with this rim, what I was drawing on here, if I want to override some of this darker stuff that's in there, then when I paint that, again, because it sits on top of it, then it's going to push over the top of the dark lines. And then sometimes you need that. So I don't have tons of that in here. Like this. Right here. I'm just going to erase this back a little bit and go to my eraser. I will find an airbrush eraser that's a bit softer and just make it a little bit larger. And sometimes I overdraw stuff, and if I just need to knock it back, then it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. So from here, the other thing I can do is I'll make another group and maybe call this FX like that, and then I'll just make this a regular layer, and I'll just call this color dodge like this, and I'll set the blending mode to color dodge. And I've got a brush that is, let's see here, I've got a brush that is called Airbrush Glow, and really it's just an airbrush, but the blending mode has been set to color dodge on there. And so I know we're not really adding color information into the value part, but if we did something like, let's say this orange value and through here, something like this, I'm going to hit OK for that. And then what I'm going to do is, if we make the brush size pretty large on here, let's just say we wanted to brighten this up, and then maybe I wanted a little bit more red on here like that. We can hit OK for that. You can see how we could build this up, and then we could start to make it feel almost metallic at that point. But again, because we are working with value, we could do this where we're just working with gray values. We could do adjustment on that and do hue saturation, and I could kill all the saturation on there. So if I did paint with something, I can go to the value area, and then take the saturation, actually take the saturation out like that, and then I'm just painting with something that's in this value range within here. And if it is brighter, then I can come up and through here, and the more I keep adding to it, it just keeps brightening up. Again, I could always take my eraser tool and I could erase that out, so we could just emphasize shapes if we are wanting to. And on this, I don't have that selection, so it's possible that it can bleed out past things. I could also do something like a marquee on this. And let's just say I wanted to do a shape that was going to be like the glass on this. I can hit Control H so I don't have to see this, and if I make my brush size a lot larger, Alt right click and drag, that'll do that too. And then I could do something over the top of this. It's starting to feel like that, and maybe build up a really bright highlight within there like that as well. So I'd have to push on this a bit more and keep working with it to solidify some of the shapes. I think right now for me the arm is probably the thing that's getting closest to this. I would still want to do a lot of work on the face and that area to solidify everything and make it feel nice and round. It's pretty flat to me right now in the state that it's in. But I think this demonstration should give you everything that you need to figure out how you can do your shape separations, but then also a non-destructive way of working inside of Photoshop to add shading over the top of everything and get the lighting and shading component moving on your design. And then have it set up in a way that you can always go back and you can tweak these values and try to get everything in the best shape possible.